Today, Canada's left-wing newspapers wrote their first critical comments about Chief Spence, the chief of the Attawapi-Scandal Indian Reserve, and the gross mismanagement and incompetence on her reserve. Here's the Toronto Star's front page. Here's the CBC. And here's the left-wing Montreal newspaper, La Presse. For 27 days, these reporters have not been reporters. They've been political activists, cheerleaders for Spence, uncritically regurgitating anything she's said. 27 days because it's the 27th day of her so-called hunger strike. I say so-called because Spence admits to snacking several times a day. I'm not sure we needed to wait for her snacking admission, though, because the woman still obviously weighs in at around 200 pounds, which would be a holy miracle in the history of hunger strikers who typically start to look like skeletons after 2 weeks. I mentioned this just to show how credulous the media has been. I mean, until today. Today they pivoted and started reporting what I've been saying here on The Source all last week. Actually, going back to 2011, I first did a detailed accounting of Attawapi-Scandal based on their financial reports more than a year ago. So why did the rest of the media, who have either mocked me and the Sun News Network for our tough questions about Attawapi-Scandal and the I Don't Know More protests, or just plain old ignored us, why did the rest of the media suddenly start writing about the same things that I've been talking about all on the same day they all did it? Is there something magical about today that made them do it? No, the answer is they all received a leaked copy of a new audit done by the accounting firm Deloitte showing rampant, widespread, systemic mismanagement of Attawapi-Scandal. Spence is running the reserve into the ground and getting rich off it at the same time. Here are some shocking statements from the audit that finally got the left-wing media out of the cheerleading business and into the reporting business. Quote, "During our audit of your payroll cycle, we were informed that internal checks involving the selection of random timesheets and comparison to amounts recorded and verified are not being done. Furthermore, although the paychecks are signed by 2 officers having signing authority under your policy, prior to this stage, it appears that management does not conduct a review of the pay run or authorizes the printing of checks prior to it being done," unquote. Did you get that? So someone would just plunk down a stack of checks in front of people and they'd be signed. No invoices, no proof of any work done, no contracts. They just sign whatever in front of them. Oh, and funny that the chief, Chief Spence, and her live-in boyfriend, Clayton Kennedy, who's the financial manager of the town, they both happen to have signing authority. Isn't that cozy? No paperwork, but the 2 lovebirds have got your back for $34 million a year. No problem. I'd trust them. Wouldn't you? You know, any organization writes down their decisions of meetings. They're called minutes of meetings. But Attawapi-Scandal isn't just a business or something like your local Rotary Club. It's the government with enormous power over the lives of everyone who lives on the reserve. And it's the place where all the government money goes. But here's what the auditors said Attawapi-Scandal did, and I quote again. "Several minutes of meetings were not signed. Most were kept on the laptop of a banned administration employee and had not in hard copy format. And some minutes were missing altogether." So decisions were made, but no one kept any records of them? They weren't printed out, they weren't signed, or maybe they were just kept on someone's computer, seriously, like they couldn't be tampered with or anything. Stop for a moment and think of what you'd do if your city council cut checks and made decisions without even keeping a record of what they were doing. Imagine how wild they'd run with their waste and corruption and feather bedding. Even the so-called accounting was just so-called. This is from the audit also. Let me quote. "During our audit, we noted that many general journal entries made had no supporting documents. When asked for explanations of the entries, often none could be provided," unquote. So even if an expenditure was written down, no one knew what it was for, who did any work, if there was a contract, if there was an invoice, and the so-called accountants couldn't even provide a verbal explanation when the auditors later asked them. $34 million a year this place goes through. So what's their budget like? Are they sticking to budget? Well, yeah, about that. Quote, "During the current fiscal year, budgets were not compiled. We believe that the First Nation has an urgent need for a budget in order to prevent or minimize future deficits and to be able to operate within First Nations available funding," unquote. There's no budget, no plans, no rules. It's whoever can get a blank check in front of the chief and her boyfriend. That's budgeting up there. No wonder a town with so much money poured into the top of the funnel leaves so many at the bottom poor with leaky roofs and shoddy homes. I mean, $34 million from the government last year. 3 chiefs on the payroll, 18 aldermen on the payroll. The chief's boyfriend's on the payroll, the financial manager he is, at $850 a day plus expenses. But no one has bothered to write a budget for this place? Households have budgets. High school clubs have budgets. Kids with an allowance make budgets. You don't need an $850 a day financial manager to know you need a budget. But they do have an $850 a day financial manager. But they don't have a budget or record keeping. It's shocking. No wonder the CBC, the Toronto Star, La Presse, all the left-wing newspapers have been in love with Theresa Spence and have pretended she's been on a hunger strike for a month. No wonder they finally turned on her. I mean, what I've just shown you in that audit is pretty damning. You just can't pretend anymore that everything's fine, right? Except, and I'm sorry about this, I just played a trick on you. Every comment I read was actually from the auditors of Attawapi-Scandal. I read it word for word. I even showed you the management letter by the auditor. That's what we had on the screen there. But that's not from the audit leaked to the left-wing press today. That's from the public audit that has been on the Attawapi-Scandal band's website for a year. The same place all of my financial information has come from this past week of shows, and even on last year's show about Attawapi-Scandal. My point is, all of the problems that were detailed in the new audit were detailed in that were leaked in the audit leaked to the left-wing press today, that they ran breathlessly like they had some scoop. It's all been out there. I've been talking about it. It's been on the band's website. Check out attawapiscat.org yourself. I mean, the media party just didn't care about this because you don't dare ask tough questions of politicians if they're Indian chiefs, right? Because that would be racist, right? Even the grotesque relationship between Chief Spence and her lover was known about by the left-wing press. They just didn't care about it. A year ago, before Chief Spence became a hero to the media party and the latest campaign to get Harper, the CBC actually met Spence's boyfriend, the $850 a day financial manager who can't draft a budget. Look at this clip dug up from a CBC show that aired a year ago. Look at this.
The perception is that you're a bit of a problem, and that the relationship with the chief is a bit of a problem, and that it taints.
It doesn't matter what our relation, nobody's business.
Whoa, creepy guy. Now, the CBC broadcast that a year ago about the relationship between the chief and the financial manager, $800 a day. But they have sat on that video tight since last year. In the past month, as Chief Spence has gone on to war against Stephen Harper and had her fake hunger strike, the CBC has forgotten about all the shenanigans that they actually uncovered a year ago. They didn't breathe a word of that footage that they had. Look, Kennedy and Spence clearly tripped the wires in the band's conflict of interest code. Here's it on the screen here. Again, it's something that's been on the band's public website for years. But the CBC didn't feel it would be appropriate to mention this conflict of interest in the past month. I mean, Chief Spence is so close to starving to death. No need to add extra stress on her, right? Look, I'm glad the rest of the media party is finally talking about the scandal at Attawapi-Scandal, a scandal I can assure you that is not unique amongst Canada's 600-plus Indian bands, none of which have the same accounting or governance scrutiny that regular politicians and city halls and parliaments do. It took a deliberate leak of the new audit to get them interested so the media party could pretend they broke the story instead of following weeks behind us here at The Sun. Fine, great. Welcome to the story, guys. Sorry to break you away from your love affair with the fake hunger striker or your latest robocall story or whatever else you're working on. But I read the stories in La Presse and the CBC and the Star today. And then I managed to get a copy of the new audit that they were all reporting about, the one leaked to them. And do you think they reported on it objectively today? Do you think that you can trust them to tell you what that new audit of Attawapi-Scandal actually says? Of course you can't, because the media are still in the tank for corrupt Indian band accounting.